great speakers last night, and got Famous Amos today at lunch. Y'all need to know something about Famous Amos. He wouldn't be so famous if I hadn't eaten all them cookies. Could have had yogurt.
I've got to thinking also, as I prepared for this, about the impact Margaret has had on my life in the past 5.5 years. I'm a better speaker today, and a better person, I think, because of her. And I also realized there were 5 other women who have literally helped make me the man I am today. Dolly Madison, Sarah Lee, Mrs. Fields, Little Debbie, and Aunt Jemima.
When you weave humor and inspiration in with those facts, the information we want to get out, then that makes that message powerful and, more importantly, memorable. And that's what we're after.
I do from time to time try to find the perfect gift, the thing that I think will be right on the money for her. And it doesn't have to be a special occasion. It can be just see something and go get it, or take it to her. And every time I think it's been okay, except for one time. Saw this thing and I bought it. So that's exactly what she's going to like this. Going to like this a lot. All excited, got home, gave it to her. And it wasn't something you wrap up just in a bag. And when she took it out of the bag, I could tell by the look on her face, she wasn't near as excited about this thing as I was. It was a home menopause testing kit. She'd been making some rumblings about that over the past, year or so. I thought, well, she'd love that to be able to find out for sure. I'm telling you guys, if you've considered that, forget it. That's not a good idea. Don't I'll get you in trouble. But we're all getting older. I was part of that sign, I guess. And I actually, this past fall, felt my energy going down a little bit. I've been on a diet for the past couple of years, and I've lost about 70 pounds on that diet. And of course, those of you who have never seen me before are wondering, how big was he? And I went to my doctor, and it was sometime back in November, and told him my problem and said I need to just figure out what's going on here. And he said, as they all do when you come in with something like that, he said, let's do some blood work. So they took some blood, and I had my annual physical, have it every January. And when I went in this January, I had not heard from them about this blood work. And so he got through with the physical, and I asked him, I said, hadn't heard from you about that. What were the results? And he said, well, just a minute. He started flipping those pages, and finally he looked at it and said, well, your testosterone's a little low. I said, does that mean like am I like 3/4 full, half full? Where am I on the gauge here? He said, well, you just low. But we can do something about that. He said, you have some options. I said, what are they? He said, well, there's a gel that you can rub on your chest we can give you. He said, now, I've never had anybody use that, so I'm not sure how well that works. So I decided I didn't want to do that. And plus, I got to thinking about Mama putting that Vicks vapor rub on me, and I just somehow didn't relate to that. Anyway, the second thing he said was there's a patch. I'm not going to describe to y'all what he said about that patch, but I decided that wasn't the answer. The third thing is a shot we can give you on a regular basis, and once a month, and that'll get you just back to just a body chemistry. As you get older, those things happen. We'll get you back up to where you're supposed to be. Well, I said, well, let me, okay. Any side effects? He said, no, it's just getting you back up where you have been all of your life. That's all, no big deal. And then he said, and we can give you the first one today. And I said, wait a minute, I'm not real sure. I didn't think about this thing. And he said, all right, go ahead and let's get started. And I said, well, okay. I said, I do have one question. Now, Casey is his nurse. Ron Barnett's my doctor. Casey's been his nurse as long as I've been going there. And Casey's the one that really does the work. She does the EKG. She does the blood work. You know how that goes in a doctor's office. And so I asked him, I said, now, Casey, I know is going to be the one to give me this shot. Is she going to be in any danger? he did the same thing you just did. He kind of laughed, and she came in shortly after that, and he was still there. He said, ask her that question. And I said, Casey, all I want to know was, when you give me the shot, are you going to be in any danger? And she started laughing too, and after she gave me the shot, and physical was through, I was leaving. As she opened the door, she hollered down the hallway, pretty good sized practice, 6 or 8 doctors, I guess, and other patients there, and opened the door and hollered, big man walking. And I like being around doctors with a good sense of humor, and mine has that.
People who fly a lot, like we all do, I've had some interesting experiences there. When I get on a plane, first thing I do is I ask the flight attendant for 2 things. One, a cup of coffee, and the second thing is for an extender. Now, because of my girth, I don't need a lot more. Matter of fact, on some planes, I can actually get it closed, but on most of them, I need just a little bit more. A skosh more, as we call it. On this particular flight, I'd gotten on to ask the flight attendant for my extender and for a cup of coffee. She'd brought it to me. I was snapped in, reading my paper, thoroughly enjoying myself, and a couple got on the plane. I hadn't noticed them yet. They sat down to the 2 seats across the aisle from me. She by the window, he beside me. What caught my ear was her giving him a hard time. I heard her say, Roland, you've gained a little weight, have you? Can't get your seatbelt on. And my heart's starting to go out to this guy. I'm feeling sorry for him. And I'm ready to almost lean over and tell him about these extenders. But before I have a chance to, I guess he thought I couldn't hear. He looks over at me and says, well, if he can get his on. I certainly ought to be able to get mine. All sympathy ceased for Roland right then. I decided it was time to have a little fun with Roland. Because I only needed a skosh more, I had about 1.5 feet left over. It's laying down in my lap. Reading my paper, reach down, pick it up, throw it over the arm of the chair. You could have heard his head snap when he saw that thing come flying in midair. When I knew he was fully gazing upon it, reached down, picked it up, twirled it a time or 2. Unbeknownst to me, the flight attendant had been watching all this. She came over, brought me my cup of coffee. As she leaned down across me, sat down, she whispered so Roland couldn't hear her. And she said, you only tell him the truth about these extenders, or do you just want him to bust at about 30,000 feet? I looked over, and sure enough, he puffed up. He's about to die. That thing on. He snapped in, but he was hurting. And I said, let him bust. We'll clean him up later. Right dog. I've done all sorts of interesting things in my life to shed some of this poundage. Joined every health club in my hometown, at least. I joined the first one ever in Columbia, owned by a friend of mine, Jerry Brown, called the Nautilus. How many of you in here, by a show of hands, have ever joined a health club or a health spa? Let me see your hands. Most everybody in this room. That's good. Got a little honesty check now. How many of you, after going for 2 or 3 months, found some little reason not to ever go back again? Let me see those hands. Bunch of you. Yeah. I remember calling Jerry up and saying, Jerry, I need to come down and lose some weight, get myself in shape. Can you help me? He said, yeah, come on down. Bring you money and some loose clothing. Remember telling him, Jerry, if I had any loose clothing, really wouldn't need you. And he said, well, get the loose you can find, come on down. So I went over to our local big boy store, got a big thing I could get, and packed it all up, went in, walked in the front door, and as soon as I walked in, first person I spotted, wide shoulders, little teeny waist, muscles on top of muscles. Kind of person looks like they pump iron 2 or 3 hours a day. Y'all know the kind of person I'm talking about. She was the cashier. And the rest of them looked a lot like that. Took me up to the locker room, assigned me my locker. Here I am. You got a picture of this scene. Got a bench there. My foot's up on it. Sweat just pouring out off of me. Me trying to get down to my tennis shoes, get them tied up. And this perfect physical specimen had been watching me and getting himself ready, and we chatted a little bit, and he felt comfortable enough finally to say something, and he looked at me and he said, I used to be big like you. He was begging me to ask him. So I said, well, how'd you do it? Like I cared, but I wanted to just choke him, get him out of the locker room. But he said two things. Number one, don't eat anything but tuna fish till you lose all the weight you want to lose. I got tickled thinking about that. Number 18-wheelers driving into my neighborhood, it'd take full of tuna to do any good. Second thing he said, you got to run 4 or 5 miles every day. I know it's going to come as a shock to some of y'all in this room. I ain't a runner. Matter of fact, I promised my family, I don't know how the Lord's going to take me off this earth. None of us know that. But one thing they can be assured of, they ain't never going to get a phone call saying, we done found a big boy out by the road dead with a pair of running shoes on. I'm going to go out some other way.
When I do a band quiz, a lot of times I talk about the difference between being ignorant and being stupid. Now, y'all know the difference, right? Ignorant's curable. We can work with ignorant. We can't do a whole lot with stupid, but ignorant we can deal with it. Jim Rozier, a good friend of mine from Berkeley County, came up to me one time after I spoke to a rural economic conference or something there in our state, and he said, I got 2 examples of ignorant and stupid you're going to really love. And these are true stories. He's a county manager of Berkeley County. Said a lady came in his office one day just wagging her finger, mad on a wet setting hand, vein stuck out. Said, I don't know what's going on around here, but we've been paying our water bill for over 40 years. I don't know who decided to cut the hot water off our house, but I want that hot water cut back on. I need my hot water. Jim said he couldn't believe what he was hearing about her going off on this hot water deal. And he said she finally stopped and went for air. And he said, when he jumped in and said, man, wait a minute. He said, we don't have a hot water line coming to your house. We don't even have a cold. We have a water line. We send you water. You do with it whatever you want to when it gets there. Heat it, cool it, we don't care. And he said, he knew I couldn't convince this woman otherwise. He said, I sent her on home and said, I tell you what, I got a meeting to go to. If you're going home, I'll get a plumber to come take care of that. So sure enough, she leaves. He calls the plumber, tells the plumber what the situation is. Plumber apparently goes and takes care of it. Jim goes to his meeting and forgets about it. That afternoon, he said the phone rang. It was the plumber, chuckling. He said, I went to her house. When you mentioned her name, I thought I knew exactly who you were talking about. Her husband had passed away a couple of months earlier. He'd handled all of that. She honestly had no clue they had a hot water heater. Probably one of the few people on the planet who didn't know. Hot water heaters heat water. He showed it to her. Fix the element. She's got hot water now. And the plumber said, she asked me to call and apologize to you for the way she acted in your office. And they both got a little chuckle out of that. And Jim said, here's an example of somebody who didn't know something. She was ignorant, or as we say in our neck of the woods, ignorant, I-G-N-U-R-N-T, ignorant. Anyway, said she was ignorant. Now she knows. I'll never hear from her again about that. He said, let me tell you about stupid. He said, got a phone call one day. Lady says, Mr. Rozier, I want you to come out here to our house and put up one of those deer crossing signs. He said, ma'am, we don't do that. That's the Department of Natural Resources. They know where the deer cross the road for food and water. That's their responsibility. She said, that's the problem out here. These deer out here around our house are crossing just anywhere they want to. They're crossing right in the road. So they're crossing down the other end, and they come in through the yard, and just... She said, we need a sign so the deer will know where to cross the road. Jim said, I couldn't believe what I was hearing. He said, I finally told her, I said, ma'am, you know the deer can't read. And he said, she very indignantly told him, said, well, of course I know the deer can't read. That's why y'all put that picture of that jumping deer up.
I've learned that levity that we bring to a meeting, if we can keep people laughing and enjoying what they're doing, we can keep them thinking. And as a result of that, hopefully we can send them out of there with the commitment to do something different in their lives to make an improvement.
Well, one of the things I believe of people who think big and live large is that they have a tremendous level of confidence mixed with a good dose of humility. I remember a young man named Terry Blocker who back, 20 years ago, longer than that, 25 years ago. I have a younger brother who's 14 years younger than I am, and when Wes was playing Little League Baseball, I was in my mid-20s, and I remember going to the baseball field where they were playing, and one day after a game, we were sitting around and talking, and as you would do with young people that age, because they weren't talking too much, I needed to do something about our conversation, so I said, well, what do you guys want to be when you grow up? And they all said the typical things, fireman, policeman, whatever else, but Terry Blocker said, I want to be a professional baseball player.